you have been to one of our executive speaker series lectures before? Have some idea? Okay. So we have some of you who are here for the first time. I think that you know that we started this initiative, I guess, about 3 or 4 years ago, and we have gotten very, very positive feedback from students. They say that it is a great opportunity for them to get to see people who are actually working in businesses, using some of the skills that hopefully you are developing now, and to have you hear their journey, have you hear how they sat in a seat like you're sitting in today, and the path that they took to achieve the position that they're currently in. It's our way, we say that with our executive speaker series, we try to bring the boardroom to the classroom. Our speaker today is the only one in this year's lineup that is from a not-for-profit organization.
Whoops.
And that was very much intentional, because you know that in the Turner College we have an emphasis on servant leadership. We have a master's degree that some of you may be interested in organizational leadership, and we prepare a lot of our students to go to work in not-for-profit organizations. And one of the things that we wanted to point out with this speaker is how important business is for running not-for-profit organizations. Our speaker this morning is Mr. Scott Ferguson. He is the president and CEO of United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley. And he's been there since 1989.
No, 2007.
I was going to say, you've been with the United Way
since 89.
1989. I was going to say, you've only been in Columbus. What, 2007. 2007,
right.
All right? And he is from about as far away, far north as you can go, from Windham, Maine. And he's lived in Columbus for 8 years. I bet you like the weather in Columbus a lot better than you did.
Absolutely, this time of year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he said, he joked with me earlier that he went to college in the South. He went to the University of Southern Maine. And he has a degree in history. He is married for 39 years, and I mention that because his wife is on the faculty here at CSU. She teaches in the nursing school. There are 1,250 United Ways in the U.S., and they are all separate. They are independent of each other. As of 2014, our local United Way is the 93rd largest one in the country. And they fund, and I won't steal his thunder telling you how many programs they fund, but I'd just like to say that Scott Ferguson has been in Columbus since 2007. He has become a very integral part of the business community here. And last year, this United Way raised over $7 million in this community for charitable organizations, and that is huge. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Scott Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think everybody says me talking to a business school, right? Is this on, Sean? Do I have to? Okay. So I really appreciate being here, and it's good to see some familiar faces. Janet, who works in the international area, right? I run with Janet, so it's good to see her with clothes on. Got to use that one, right? And Ron, I have lunch with almost weekly at Rotary, so it's really a pleasure to be here. It's also good to see somebody showed up, because you just never know, right? You just never know. And you will find as I go through this, I like to use humor. That was Dr. Seuss' birthday, which was like a month ago. And I didn't grow up with Dr. Seuss. I don't have children. I don't read it to the cats. But I dressed up and went to some elementary schools, and I became known as the tall cat. And where's the tall cat? So it was great fun, and reading is certainly important kinds of things. But I want to talk to you about the journey and how I got from where you are sitting there and saying, what the heck am I going to do, to where I am now, because sometimes it amazes me, because you just never know. How many of you really know what you want to do? Well, there's a couple. What do you want to do? Oh, yeah, well, don't we all?
This is your fallback plan?
Yeah. You had your hand up too. Oh, that's good. So you have some ideas. When I was in college, I had no idea. So I'm going to talk about how my journey from going to college, messing around, getting married, being a jerk, and get here. I'm just saying. And also it's kind of humbling to see who else you've had speak. And I know last time was David Passman, who was on our board of directors. He was a board chair. He was my boss for a while. That was more topical, and I'm sure that was interesting. I read his interview and watched the tape of that. So I'm going to talk about how we got here, and as I said, my wife and I, she's the smart one, right? Yeah. She knows, she works in the nursing. I got to brag about my wife, Donna. She has her master's in nursing, has been here now for 5 years on the faculty. She just got notified that she won some award for writing at CSU. Right? Did she tell you? She probably didn't tell you.
It was announced.
Okay. And then she's a finalist for Faculty of the Year, too. So I'm glad that I married up. And I would suggest to any of you guys, marry up. So how did I get here? When we lived in Portland, Maine. My wife was teaching nursing. They were doing away with their program. I worked at a cable company, a division of Time Warner Cable, in accounting and finance. How many accounting majors in here? Finance. It's a great profession, if you like it. But my first, I kind of goofed around. We got married. I was in college. I dropped out. And I did some painting. I did some roofing. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. Originally, I thought I'd be a teacher. I took one education class, and that was it. And when you realize you had to interact with children, so that was the end of that. So I was very fortunate to work for a company. I was hired as a payroll guy, and I became the supervisor of heavy manufacturing, that they paid for my education. They allowed me to take off almost every Monday to go to class, and I concentrated on accounting and finance and business. I didn't quite get that degree. It's in history. I should have. But they prepared me to go forward. And they laid me off, but I was heavy manufacturing in the late 80s. And I went to the cable company as a general ledger accountant. I really thought I wanted to be an accountant till I did it. And this is back in the day when you had I guess we had spreadsheets, but column pads. Some of you remember column pads. And they were paying for my master's degree. But unfortunately, we left before I finished it. So that's a regret I have in my education. I didn't quite finish that. So I was working there, way up here. We lived right there. And Donna's job was doing away with. We went to my 15th class reunion and said, damn, these people haven't even left town. They're still on the same street. I at least moved 2 towns over. We needed to see the world. So we both started looking. Certainly in my network, I interviewed in Monroe, Louisiana. Anybody from Monroe? End of the earth, almost. And my accent was much thicker back then. This is 30 years ago. I couldn't understand what they said. They couldn't understand what I said. I didn't get that job. Donna interviewed for the University of Guam. In some respects, being a beachcomber would have been okay, but we decided we wouldn't go there. And she ended up getting a job in South Dakota. Anybody here from South Dakota? Anybody been to South Dakota? Frank's been. It's a great place. If you've never been to Mount Rushmore and the Badlands, you need to go. We live 7 hours away from there. And when I got there, I had run the United Way, and I'll talk a little bit more about the United Way, but I'd done it in the workplace. I was told to do it. So I had that experience, and by the time we moved, I had the job as executive director of United Way that raised $400,000. And it's business skills. And this one I'm going to point out. This is a business. I spent an hour and a half this morning looking at our budget. Because just like anybody else, just because it's nonprofit doesn't mean you can't watch the money. So we're in South Dakota for 3 years, did pretty well. It is the end of the earth. It's so remote. And the other thing I would encourage, if you take away, is take risks. I never thought we were risk takers. We moved from Maine, where I saw the ocean every day, to the middle of nowhere. To the third biggest city in South Dakota was 25,000 people. But the governor knew me by name. The senators knew me by name. But they would know me now. But you got to take a risk. Calculate it, but do it. So we were there for 3 years and then went to Wisconsin. Actually, it was down here, right on the border, where I got a job running a bigger United Way. And every United Way is separate, independent, like a franchise. So you don't get transferred, you apply. And Donna worked in a hospital in Illinois. We're an hour and a half from Chicago, an hour from Milwaukee. Great place. Dying town. So we were there for 4 years and then took a great big flyer to Atlantic City, New Jersey. It was a casino town. It's hot in here. Casino town, no sense of community. And a lot of what we do in nonprofit work and certainly in volunteer kind of stuff is you got to have a sense of community. To give you an idea, and to talk about risk, my poor wife, because I had been to South Dakota with her, so I knew what it was like. They brought her to Wisconsin. She didn't come to Atlantic City with me. She knew where it had been. She said, I don't want to go there, but I took the job. And some of the things that happened there were, we were setting up our bank accounts. The bank was robbed. Got to meet FBI. It was just crazy. I had 4 cats. They all died. I just blamed New Jersey. It wasn't because they were 18 years old. Developed terrible allergies that went away once I moved. And the thing that was a kicker, I also play ice hockey because you got to have an outlet. You got to have an outlet from work. And I played in Philadelphia, and we were coming back one night. I was coming back. It was midnight. Torrential downpour. And I couldn't tell what was going on, but it was rain and pulling off to where our exit, and we lived in a big townhouse complex, is finally realized the road was flooded. So I said, well, I'll go around through this other development. And as stupid as it sounds, it was flooded, the retention pond. So I had a Honda Accord, which floats. It's midnight, it's downpour, tired. You said, why would you drive into it? It just happened. But I went to somebody's house. They were up, because you could see the TV. I don't think he had a shirt on. He had a beer and a cigarette. And I just kind of shook up, and he just slammed the door in my face. And that was when I decided we got to get out. So I've also been successful. Every place, a lot of what you get measured by in the nonprofit world is dollars raised. So every place I've been, we've been successful. So then we went to upstate New York, Utica, New York. Great area. It's between Syracuse and Albany, close to Lake Placid, a couple hours away. Unfortunately, it's Rust Belt, and it's dying. But we were there for 8 years. And the thing that we got tired of there was snow. Who's here from snow country? So there's some. Our average snowfall was 9 feet. It was lake effect snow, which they didn't tell us when they recruited us. But you get tired of that, even though everybody knows how to deal with it. And we really wanted to live in the Southeast, and I saw the job in Columbus, Georgia. I'd never heard of it. Had you before you came? So that's how we got down here. And been here, it'll be 9 years this summer. It's the longest we've spent any place other than home. So I think that's pretty cool. But it says a lot for this town. So I got to tell you, if you never thought about taking a risk, do it. I was talking to somebody recently. I said, just do it. Calculate it. Don't be crazy about it. Research where you're going. What do you get to lose? Nothing. You might have to go back. So who cares? But the experiences are great. And the other thing that I've found is in these positions, you said I'm part of the business community, etc. You know, I got a special parking spot today. Although I had to get out and move my cone. And I did a really lousy job parking, but I think I'm on the grass. I'm just the United Way guy. Take it in stride when you have leadership positions. I'm just the guy that is up on the stage. This is Kindle. Kindle I've seen grow up. She goes to Easter Seals. 4 years ago when I met her, she couldn't walk. She walked across the stage. This is our big kickoff. We have 1,000 people. So I'm the guy on the stage. I'm the guy that gets the, that was one of the photos of the year, one of our photographers, so it's in the paper. It's still, keep it in perspective. Whatever you do, keep it in perspective. Don't let ego, we all have egos, but I try to keep it in check. Try to make sure that I deflect the credit to all that got me up there and made me look as good as I can. My knees were killing me that day. John, you're talking about injuries? My knees were never the same after that. I don't think anybody noticed how difficult it was for me to get up. And one of the things, too, I want to talk about is it's about luck. People talk about luck and where you are. I've found the harder I worked, the luckier I am, right? And I think somebody said that in one of those Sunday interviews, but you just got to put it in. You can't coast. You got to work hard. You got to pay your dues. So what is United Way? The United Way is, Dr. Hadley mentioned. Do you have a prescription pad? Oh, then. I was just seeing what kind of doctor you are. PhD. Nobody got it. This is all on the quiz. The United Way is 1,250 local nonprofit, independent nonprofits in North America. And also now it's in the worldwide. There's another 400 or so in the world, although philanthropy really is based in America. In England, it's just beginning. In Europe, it's just beginning. The other great big place, it's like Aflac, is Japan. Japan has thousands of small, what's called community chests, where people raise money and distribute it. So last year, as this worldwide system, we raised $5 billion. That's not insignificant. With 12,000 staff, and we rely on volunteers, almost 3 million volunteers. So that's significant, and that's what we have to continue. But also what we have to do, the United Way system's been around 125 plus years. It's a consolidated fundraising where most of the time we go into the workplace. 70% of what we raise goes from the workplace, payroll deduction. Here in the university system, it's more controlled. It's a state campaign. It's regulated from Atlanta. So we don't have that kind of regulation, although we're part of that. In the business model, it used to be a closed kind of system. Just certain agencies, those 27, we fund 55 programs in 27 agencies locally. And because we don't fund the whole thing, but it changes all the time. It used to be very closed, once you're in, you're in. It's like a good old boy network, very paternalistic. And we're changing. Very slowly here because every place is different, but you have to react to your marketplace. It's all about the marketplace. And it's, one of the things I wrote down here is it's product mix. You're studying marketing, et cetera, sales. We have a mix of products, and those are the agencies we support. It's Easter Seals, Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army, Girls Inc., those kinds of things that create quality of life and access for those that can't afford it. So our local United Way has been here about 70 years in one form or another. It used to be called Community Chest, Red Feather. And these are some of the things that we're doing. We have, and this is for you and your families, 211 is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call center that we contract with Atlanta, and it's also online. It's I think we have 1,800 services in there, and I think some of the university things are in there. Whatever you need, whether it's child care or you need disaster or counseling, it's in there, confidential, and it's working. We have a volunteer center. I know that Day of Service does a lot. Is that what you call it here? Day of Service? And servant leadership. We have a volunteer center. If you ever want to volunteer, you can just go to our website, click on volunteer, and there's hundreds of opportunities to match what you need. And I'll tell you, as an employer, seeing you volunteer is helpful because that shows that you have some real world life experience. Home for Good is a home program that we're doing in conjunction with a lot of different people, but it resides with us. It's getting people in houses. In the last 15 months, we've housed 204 people, half of which are veterans, which is pretty significant. And also, you got to brag a little bit, right? I know in the South you don't brag, you state the facts. So it's the facts. We were recently nominated by a city manager and received an award through the state, one of 6 for the housing efforts through Georgia Trend, which is the Chamber of Commerce statewide. And Sanford Bishop also nominated us, and we got an award from the Congressional Black Caucus for our work with veterans. So it's good stuff. You don't always have to blow your horn, but sometimes if you don't, somebody will spin in it. Don't forget that. We also do stuff with youth. We have a 7th grade youth camp where we teach children how to volunteer and give back. AFLAC sponsors that. And the other one is youth counselors, high school students. We had 40 high school students this year that volunteered about 600 hours, raised almost $4,000, and then they choose where that money goes back. And they interviewed some programs, and we'll announce that next week. And we also have a Women's Leadership Council that is made up of women that give $1,000 or more a year, do a lot of volunteering, and they identified a big need in the community, which probably most of us hadn't thought about, is clean underwear. Just think if you got up this morning, certainly the homeless, if you didn't have a place to sleep, a place to get cleaned up, and you didn't have something clean to put on. There's a big need, so every year they raise a lot of money and a lot of underwear. We have a bring one, wear one, bring one lunch, where last year we had 2,000 pieces of undergarments. And then it gets distributed to women in shelters and transition and that kind of stuff. And one of the things I've found, hopefully this is kind of a message, is I'm just the guy. I'm not the brightest bulb sometimes, but if you have a good team around you and know where to hire, you don't want people just, I don't want to hire people just like me, and you shouldn't either as you do your career. You want to hire people that complement your style. And together, team is overused sometimes, but together we have a good machine that's working. And a lot of my job as a leader is to keep that machine working, keeping the pieces fitting together, or the flywheel going, or however you want to do it. Our local numbers, we have 18 full-time employees. Last year we raised $7,104,000, most ever. When you look at that, it does place us in the 93rd and 96th biggest in the country for revenue. And our metropolitan area is like 128. Very generous community. Our total budget, when you look at investments, endowment, the Home for Good programs, over $9 million. And the key things I look for, if these are accounting, finance, business people, and my business background has helped. I'm running a business. I may not be looking for a profit, but I am looking for a surplus. And when I came here, we had a $300,000 deficit. I'm glad to say now we have $1 million surplus. So when we had to replace our roof, we had the money. When we had to renovate a building, we had the money. If something happens bad and some natural disaster, we'll have money to get through that. So what I look at, what I was looking at this morning, is collections. These are pledges. People pledge to give. I can't make them give. I can't send Guido after them. So we have a reserve. We don't collect 100% because people change jobs, they die, they get mad, whatever. Operating budget, are we under budget? In 27 years I've been doing this and never been over budget, never not hit a collections number. And cash. No matter what somebody tells you, cash is king. It's tough to make any money on it now. Investments are awful because we don't, it's all in CD kind of stuff. So we get excited when we get a CD for 0.3% now. So that's some of the local numbers. And these are just, I'm trying to make business connections. We have a brand, the United Way brand and logo. This logo is on the Forbes list, is the #1 of the top 50 nonprofits. But nobody knows what we do. People trust us to invest their money wisely through a volunteer process. I don't do it, we have volunteers. So United Way Worldwide, which is our national organization, that we pay 1% dues, like a franchise fee, they do these every year, and our trust is down. It's the lowest it's been in 10 years. And we get measured against Red Cross, Salvation Army, cancer, those kind of big ones, because we're in that league nationally. So it's low, half the public. Did you ever know what, any of you know what United Way was before the United Way goes? Some do, some have seen some nods. Maybe your parents in the workplace. But and the other thing is, we don't spend any money for advertising. So we're also working on a strategic plan and talking about focus groups and getting the message out, and getting the message out differently from the gray-haired guys like me to folks like you. It's different. So how do we do that without spending any money, but we also have to invest some money? It's that balance, generating more revenue keeping expenses under control, and investing more in the community. It's a business model. We're trying to grow our existing customer base and look for new ones. This is the biggest reason why people don't give. Lack of knowledge. The other thing is why people don't give to anything, whether it's CSU, the church, or United Way, nobody ever asked them. Got to ask, got to make the case to give. Economics, I think economics is just an excuse. Oh, it's a recession. That was 8 years ago. Get over it. I want to brag a little bit about this area. Facts again, facts. Our biggest single contributing company, because as I said, it's mostly employees, is TSYS. $1.4 million last year, pledged to us. Aflac's almost $1 million. It's just amazing the generosity of this community. It's much different than others I've been in. But we do have a, hopefully you see the business connection here. We have a competitive advantage. We have payroll deduction. Just as the state campaign has one, when I go into these companies I'm talking about, you don't have to take the money out of your pocket. You don't have to write a check. You can have X amount of money taken out of your paycheck every week. And that, most places don't have that. But we're losing it. We're losing the shift in generations in companies and what their philosophies are in philanthropy are changing. So we got to change with them. Is nationally only 18% of the workforce allow it. Locally we're at 58%. So we are a unique area. We're still at the end of that cul-de-sac. We don't get Atlanta news, so we're still ahead of that curve. But of the successful as we are, only 15% of the local workforce give. 120,000 workforce, we're getting 15% of them. Trust is high, still 30% say nobody asked them, because they don't remember, they're just kind of sitting there. And this is what I want you, I hope I think about some of this stuff. We actually have a job opening, communications associate. Anybody looking? Got to have creative skills, InDesign, Adobe Suite. People don't think we work year round. We don't think we're professionals. They don't think I can get a job at Synovus or TSYS. I think I could. I have skill sets. It's not laid back. We care about money. We have a wage scale. It may not be up with the big boys, but Synovus developed it for us. It's based on research. We pay competitively. We have best benefits we can afford. We are well managed. Our CFO is a CPA. He's not a slouch. He retired, and now he's working for us. And we'll hire anybody with passion. Passion helps. You all have to be excited about your job. If you don't feel good about Kindle, who's a little girl, then you're probably in the wrong business. But you just got to be a good person. You got to be a good team player. Kind of the skills you need. It's all the stuff I'm sure you're teaching in this school. Now I recently I was in a little meeting, and it was a grant proposal, not for us, but somebody else, another funder, and one of the programs came from CSU. It was about placing students as interns in nonprofits to prepare them for the business world. Did you do that? I don't know who did it. And a CEO of, if I said the name, you'd all know it, said, why would I ever hire somebody out of a nonprofit for my business? So after I got out of his throat, I explained to him that we're professionals. Just because it says nonprofit doesn't mean we're not a business. She said, I have $9 million and 18 people I'm responsible for. I can't just go, things keep me awake at night related to business. So think of us as a business. And these skills that you're probably learning here relate to us. In the last 18 months, we've had 3 of our people poached by TSYS. 1 was an accountant, 2 communication professionals. So I guess we are preparing those folks that want to be to move on. Because part of my job as a manager or leader is to prepare you for that next step. Because you probably won't work there forever. So how do you get into it? I will say, I was showing my wife this, and somebody at work who's a graphic designer, I didn't know who that was. Who is it? Okay, from what? Okay, thanks. I didn't realize that, because I've never seen it, but my wife knew it. I figured you'd know it. So I did some research, you know, just Google this stuff. And over the next 2 years, there'll be a 22% increase in nonprofits for finance, administration, operations, and IT. And when you think about nonprofits, there's 1.5 million nonprofits. This university is a nonprofit. One of the hospitals now is a nonprofit. So it's just not social service kinds of things. There's a lot of nonprofits, and we're all looking for skilled people. As I said, I'm looking for a campaign associate. Go to our website, look for the job description. And the other thing, I don't know what, the other thing you got to learn how to write a resume. In this day and age of getting LinkedIn and Indeed stuff, we got an email yesterday. Email was that long, had 9 typos. I don't care. I'm not looking at internships. I know you do I don't know how much internships you do with nonprofits. But some of the, you know, there's Goodwill here as a nonprofit. They're probably $25 million. Where I was in Utica, New York, we had a couple of nonprofits. One was $60 million, direct service provider. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to get in. And some of the best people I've hired over the years were interns in another nonprofit or in the United Way. We're always looking for it. NPACE, we've used them some in the past. So take that jump. Don't think it just has to be TSYS, Synovus, Bradley Company, Aflac. It could be one of our nonprofits. And if you want to get into it, just Google. I Googled nonprofit jobs. Whew. They're just every place. Or institutional advancement, right? Colleges are always trying to raise money. I always think they're at a disadvantage. I'm at a disadvantage because they have these big fat budgets. I'm just looking at the guy back there. But we're also very frugal, so that's that balance. So then a little bit about what I try to do. One of the biggest lessons, as I said, I'm not the brightest bulb. I'm a slow learner. It's different in the South. It took me 5 years to really realize that my style of humor and sarcasm and expectations couldn't be delivered the same way. It's just that, hey, how's your mama kind of stuff, right? Or when I had a wonderful employee say, oh, I didn't think you cared for me because I was homesick and I didn't call you. I would never think to call you. I don't want you calling me when I'm sick. No offense. So it's emotional intelligence. We've done a lot of work with the Cunningham Center Leadership Institute here. Ed Helton, anybody know Ed? I'm going to see Ed this afternoon. He's my coach. So that I become a better coach for the people that I work with, for my team. So it's that emotional intelligence. It's being sure as a leader or manager, everything I do, the look on my face, the way I feel, will infect your whole organization. So you got to balance that. You got to realize that and get better at reading that look of, God, when's he going to be finished? So it's just that kind of thing. And I try to deflect more of that. It really isn't about me. It's about us. And celebrating people more. We have a local board of directors that I report to, volunteers. And it's celebrating milestones of the employees, whether it's births or engagements or work anniversaries or birthdays, to let them take some of that limelight that they deserve. It's not all about me. And humor. You got to laugh at yourself. What I do is serious work, and what I do impacts a lot of people. I'm just the one guy. I'm just the United Way guy. Some think I have an accent in the South, but you know, I can use that to my advantage. So don't take yourself too seriously. Try to have clear, direct communications. That's why I've changed my style to just friggin' do it. It's your job, do it. To be more approachable, more set those expectations, and then the whole thing about pace of change is one that I think a lot of us struggle with. And I've learned this the hard way, is, well, I think I've been fairly successful, is when you go into some place, especially in a leadership or a manager or a supervisor, don't think you know everything. Just because they hired me, made a conscious decision not to hire a local Southern guy, didn't mean I knew Columbus, Georgia, or all the answers. I was very careful in how I assessed and who I talked to and how I learned about the local community before we made any changes. I've seen too many people in my career path or a lot of places that think, well, they hired me, they must think I walk on water, and get fired in a year or two. You just got to be careful. That pace of change, you got to bring people along with you, or they're going to get scared, they're going to get resistant, and they're going to get you out of there. One of my colleagues who I've known for 20 years started out and worked his way up. He was the president of one of the biggest United Ways in the country, $40–50 million. He's there 3 years, he's gone. And you know when you read that press release, somebody's pursuing other opportunities, it wasn't by choice. He got ahead of them. He thought he knew everything. I don't know much of anything. So all that stuff, you know, you do have to, it's a serious job, it's a great career choice. You got to look at it, look at all your options, and then you got to balance it about yourself. I don't work as much as I used to, but I've paid my dues. Doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it all the time. I have some outlets for my frustrations. I run a lot, not as fast as Dr. Finley back there. Can't catch him. Back in the day I played, that was a few years ago, high school. And the other thing I do, this is me. I was just telling Ron, that's me last year playing in a hockey tournament outside of Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I just got back from there a couple of weeks ago. And no, it's not an old man league. The youngest player on our team was 21. Last year we won, but this year we didn't. But you got to have something to take out your frustrations. And hockey is a very physical, even though we don't play full check, but it's very physical. The former CEO of St. Francis and I used to play, and just like little boys. And somebody at this tournament, somebody's wife said, "I'd love to know what you say out there." Probably not. Those swear words are the same in any language, whether it's Dutch, Norwegian, or Russian, or French, or Flemish. They all get the message across. So that's balance your work life with your play life, have some release. Look at nonprofits as a career, because it's not just doing good things. You got to do good things well. Anybody have any questions? Or yes?
You said you had 18 full-time staff members. What the money to pay them? Where does that come from?
We raise the money, and then we take some of that money. We take 13.6% of what we raise is for administration, and the Better Business Bureau says 30% is good. So we're pretty frugal. Yes, sir.
I've heard that people have difficulty when they're looking for jobs outside of the market, where they don't live there.
Right.
So what was your strategy for landing jobs in another state?
It was because we get job listings from United Way. It's just so they're online, and I was just lucky, I guess, and working hard and having a good resume, because my wife wrote it probably, and just being able to make those connections and having that solid track record. Some of it's through recruiters, so you can look, there are nonprofit recruiters that you can make a connection to, and it's relationships. It's not easy, I'm going to tell you that. And it's getting tough, although I would say now I think less people move. When I first started this, we moved 3 times in 10 years, 3 different states. People tend not to move as much, so it may give you an advantage if it's easy to move. Yes, sir.
What, I guess, tips or strategies would you give to somebody who's starting a nonprofit?
To begin a new profit?
Well, we just got our 501c back.
Okay.
An organization that I'm part of, and we're starting to try to figure out how to get funding and reach out to people and this, that, and the other, and just get, I guess, your name out there and get recognized as a credible source to, donate to or whatever. And I guess we're just kind of struggling on who to reach out to, what's the best way to reach out to them, and things like that.
Social media is more and more. We're trying to do more of that. The regular media, if you're having some kind of event, talking to people is all about relationships. If you want to get together sometime, we're always willing to sit down with somebody new. You have to build that credibility and that history of at least a year of service. What do you what's your focus?
Helping the homeless with like resume services, suits, things like that.
So, but the other thing I can do is hook you up to somebody that may be already doing that you can complement.
Okay.
Vice versa. Safe House does a lot of that, or Homeless Resource Network. So let's work together instead of having 1,501,000 nonprofits. Right. But yeah, shoot me an email.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? So you ready for the quiz?
So, in nonprofits, marketing, especially for marketing students, you come in with these great creative ideas, you look at the business and you say, hey, they're not doing this, this, and this. How would you recommend a student go about trying to implement their ideas and their marketing initiatives into your nonprofit?
I can only speak for us. Hopefully hopefully I don't say, oh, I already did that. I think a lot of people still do that. I want creative minds, and everybody should, but they don't, to push us. Because we don't get, we being my generation, baby boomers, not everybody's open to being pushed and changed. So you got to be persistent. You got to be professional in your pitch, and you got to be persistent. And relationships don't hurt. So me to hook you up with Safe House is a relationship that's going to get you in there, and they're not going to just say, oh, it's just a kid. So I don't have a magic answer, but be persistent. Because what we used to do ain't going to work anymore, right? It just ain't going to work. Shouldn't use ain't, right? All y'all. I forgot to take a photo, to tweet it. I'm up to 105 followers. Scott United Way.
How long have you been tweeting, Mr. Ferguson?
About a year. We're trying. Linda.
I have a question for you. You mentioned that your brand, that logo, that it's on the list as, I think you said
number one of the Forbes top 50.
Of the Forbes top 50
right.
nonprofit,
right.
I guess, logos. If you could talk for just a minute about branding in the nonprofit
right.
world. As an example, for instance, I remember when I was an undergraduate student, one of the things that I learned that I was really surprised about was the value of the Coca-Cola brand, as an example, just the brand itself. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about branding in nonprofits and about how it is very, very similar to branding in for-profit?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
We have to protect that logo and brand. And we have very strict regulations what you can and can't do with it. You're not supposed to change it. You're not supposed to make the little man in the middle. Where is he? You can't take him out or make him put a dress on him. You have to have United Way of. It can't be Chattahoochee Valley United Way. And also the colors and the font. And the reason for that is because there are so many United Ways, you want that consistent brand experience. So when you leave here and graduate and you get the big job in New York City or LA, and you say, hey, what's that United Way? It looks the same. We might do things a little differently internally, but we have to protect the brand. And part of the brand, I think, is it's like Coke. You know what you're going to get when you have a Coke or Starbucks or any of those or Amazon or LL Bean. We want to make sure you get the same experience with the United Way. It's easy to say, very difficult to do. So we try to do that because we've found in the national research, we're trying to do some locally. So people recognize the logo and the name, and they trust us. And we can never do anything, because the trust is really part of our brand, and we can never do anything to screw that up. Because part of what you see in nonprofits, is it in the paper today or recently, the Wounded Warrior guys? Great organization, spending a ton of money on themselves. They've destroyed that brand. In 1989 or 88, United Way of America, before most of you were born, United Way of America's president was embezzling, and it's taken us to your generation to get that behind us. So that all ties into that brand, and you just got to protect it. You got to make it look consistent. So if the United Way in LaGrange screws around with that logo because it says 75th anniversary and they want to put 75, it sends the wrong message. And I think it also eventually gets a trademark, doesn't it? If you mess with it too much, you can lose your trademark.
And I have one last question,
Yeah.
and that is, you mentioned that you take 13.6% of the
Right.
budget for administration. Could you talk for just a minute about how the percentage that's spent on administration is really one of the major ways by which nonprofits are evaluated?
It is. It's one way we're evaluated, and I will say we've painted ourselves into this corner about cheap and being frugal, cheap, whatever you want to call it. It's becoming more of a balance because we're measured by how much we raise. Should be measured by what the results of that money invested back into people's lives, but it's not. We've always sold ourselves as a low-cost fundraiser. You should ask anybody that asks you for money what their overhead is. But how do I balance that? We're looking at the budget today. The new budget, New Year's July 1st. Our revenue is going up this much. It went up 1.5% last year, which actually is better than most United Ways. But our costs are going up faster. And how do I keep that CPA guy, who's really good, or our graphic designer, who's really good, to keep costs down? So we've kind of painted ourselves in the corner over the last 100 years about that relationship between costs and revenue. But it's no different than any other business. It's just that we get measured by it. Ask some corporation what their cost of doing business is. It's higher than 13.6%. But we work very hard to keep it. So, and I don't know what the cap is. I wouldn't want to go above 15. I think that's a little high. But it's just difficult. But ask, if you have, of course, you don't get home phones, but the next time some police organization calls you and looks for money, ask them what their overhead is. It's probably 98%, 90%. And some of the major ones are this, unfortunately, and I hope Wounded Warriors gets back because they have great stuff, but their overhead was 40% because they were spending money on themselves. They being the guys that got fired. So it's a tough balance. It's becoming more difficult because unless this area grows, because we're pretty saturated for our penetration into the marketplace. We need economic growth for us to grow our revenues and to be able to keep and retain quality staff. That's what keeps me awake at night. Yes, sir.
How do you feel about non-traditional resumes?
As such as?
Like kind of like an infographic type deal?
I got one yesterday for this marketing. I really liked it. It was good. It was well done.
Did it make it that much more unique to stand out?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100% more. It was so good, I had a little email conversation. I couldn't afford him, but I'll keep him if the manager leaves. It has his face on it. I don't know if you put your face on it, but yeah. Yes?
One other small marketing question. A lot of times nonprofits have to make decisions based on their boards. For the marketing end of things, how do you get across to the board that you would need to increase your marketing budget? How does that employee get to you or whoever the representative is that's going to speak on behalf of the board?
It's a good question. I didn't really talk a lot. I report to a board of directors, 25 people. Current board chair is Sheriff Heath Taylor from Russell County. Next year will be Sally Martin. We have a very good relationship with our board. It's business people that are struggling with these same issues. So it's that balance. It's a balance there too. Is I want them to question us, but they trust us because they know when we bring that budget to them next week to the finance and executive committee, it's not full of fluff. We'll have to justify it, but our marketing budget didn't go up. It's still almost nothing. So it's how do you leverage relationships with Rodney at the newspaper, give us more space in a smaller paper, or TVs that don't have to give you free space anymore. So it's trust. It goes back to relationship. Yes?
I know you mentioned like people pledging or doing the payroll deduction
Right.
as far as ways to raise money, but what are like the actual activities or events that y'all do in order to raise money?
We do very little fundraising through events.
Okay.
Pretty much none, actually. We have 2 events a year. We have the kickoff, which is 1,100 people. It's just a lunch. Get everybody excited, entertain them, get them out, give them a message, and a thank you. A lot of companies will do events, whether it's TSYS last year did bubble soccer. Is it bubble soccer? You guys haven't seen, it's big soccer balls and it's big, so they use that for fundraising. You get in this big blow up ball and run into each other.
So do they kind of like host their own?
They do their own.
In like with y'all's name or
Right.
in like correlation?
Right, so some people do something that, or a bowling, or TSYS and the Waterworks do a joint 10 and 5K race for us.
Okay.
And it's more of that kind of stuff. Channel 3 just did a little fundraiser for us. And so it's whatever gets people excited and gets them involved. Because you get them involved, you get more buy-in. Yes?
What's the process if you wanted to throw an event to benefit United Way? What would be the process?
We just want to know, because it goes back to protect the brand. We want to make sure that we're in partnerships, that we can push it out to our, I think we have 12 or 14,000 emails that we push out messages to, and also that it's it's legal. Nobody's going to get hurt, that kind of stuff. So just send me another email. Because we've actually in the past, I've had people use our name and logo and had to have attorneys send cease and desist letters. So we had one guy that said, well, I'm raising money and giving it to United Way, and he wasn't. He was raising money and giving it himself. So that goes back to protection. But it's any kind of thing. It's, although you're out of school, we'll start a book drive, a school supply drive pretty soon. Last year we raised, the companies, I think we distributed 2,300 stuffed backpacks to Title I schools in Phoenix City and Muskogee School District. Title I is the poorest. So we're doing those kind of, because it's not just about the money, it's volunteers, it's helping sort that, it's giving back to the community. So, money is good, cash is king, but I can't put a price on your time or your talents and your expertise. Thank you very much, I really enjoyed it. And look at this, isn't that cool?
Thank you so much. I think this is very helpful for the students and for the rest of us as well, the faculty as well, to have someone to come in and talk about the similarities really in running a nonprofit organization. I have one last question for you,
yes.
And that is, when we read in the paper that United Way just raised $7 million, well, those are pledges.
Right.
And so just like banks have to have loan loss reserves for people who don't pay them back, I imagine you have a reserve.
9%.
9%.
Which is kind of high. We're trying to get that down.
Okay, 9%. I was curious about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On behalf of the students and the faculty and the staff at the Turner College, we want to thank you for
very
being
much,
here.
Linda.
And here is something to remember.
Is that a check?
Yeah. It is something that you can use to write some really big checks.
Well, thank you very much.
All right.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming.